I think we have got everybody we are expecting. So if everybody's all right and you've got the recording going, Natalie, we will start. So good evening, everybody. Firstly, apologies. If you just want to tell us who sent their apologies, please, Natalie.
Yeah, so we've got apologies from Eileen Milner, Sharon Morin, Steve Cox, Emma Kaminsky, Holly Sutherland, Sarah Law, and Nora O'Shea. Oh, and also Ian Donaldson this evening.
Okay, thank you for that. And have we got any declarations of interest? I see nobody's hand going up. That's good. Then we will move on to the minutes of the last meeting. And if we can go through those, I see the two actions on our action log are closed, but there are a couple of points in the minutes. Steve, for you to speak to Dr. Musafa at 0325. I don't know if you want to give a brief update when you do your bit.
I can confirm that's complete, Chair. That's happened, and Musafa and I have had a conversation in terms of the way forward for the Wellbeing Service.
Excellent, thank you. Then I'm just scrolling through. Holly had one about the breakdown of waiting lists, and I believe that must have progressed because I know she's meeting with Mike and myself, I think next week. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that in her absence or just give us a quick update on that one.
I can, Karen. I know Holly has indeed proceeded with that, and the route is, I think, to have the conversation as you've just described, but also to take the detail into our new fora with our performance fora with governors so that you can spend sufficient time being able to unpack that with colleagues.
Okay, thank you for that. Then if there's nothing else from anybody, we will take those minutes as agreed. Going on to the action log again, those are both closed. So we will move swiftly on to the chair's report, which I will take as read from Eileen. Just a couple of bits I'd like to highlight from private board and board development around the careful consideration we gave to the challenge of cost savings, which also included looking at areas for business improvements. I think one thing we can say as a trust that we've got a better understanding of where we are in terms of having the financial data and what it's telling us, and in particular the fact that we are heavily subsidising some of the work that is commissioned from us by others. But I know Eileen will want to say that we will always put the needs of the users first, but we also need to be absolutely clear-eyed that the funding doesn't meet demand, and we must continue to be robust in challenging that. We had a good development session on health inequalities, recognising the inequality of access and what that actually means to individuals. It was a sad moment to say goodbye to our old friend Ned and the outstanding contribution he has made to the trust. In terms of Ned recruitment and appraisals, it was agreed at the nominations committee to extend for a further term of 3 years. And Brian, who's been incredibly patient, will remain with us until we can get a replacement for him. And we are looking to seek a financial and audit expertise. We have we have recruited a new replacement for Ed, Professor Rudolph Cardinal, and we will be looking to ratify that later in this meeting. All appraisals have been done, and last but not least, to just comment in terms of the good work that Ben Underwood and his research and development team are doing. So I will stop there and look and see if there are any questions. I saw something go in the chat. Rick, is that from you?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I note. I'm just looking at the action log because one of them happened to be mine, and I couldn't actually see the data that I requested in the meeting, but it's 150 pages, so I might have missed it. But yeah, if you can provide the page number, that'd be great, Natalie.
Is that resolved? Yeah. So, any other questions on the chair's report? If not, I will hand over to our chief exec, Stephen Grange. Steve, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. Nice to see you, and thank you for those joining us this evening. A couple of things on my report, Chair, that I'll just skim through, and then if it's okay with colleagues, I'll pause and just talk a little bit about the environment that we're operating in at the moment. So we talk about the positive things. At the moment, you will notice sporting a new shiny background. And that new shiny background is recognition, actually, of the organisation's prowess with regards research and its contribution to applied research into improving care. It was a week or so ago that the University of Cambridge has awarded us the official status of university teaching partner status, and that means that we are one step further towards being a part of the University Teaching Association, which is direct recognition of a number of things. One is concept of applied research, two is the contribution to improvement in health and care, and the third is more in my wheelhouse, which is focusing on strategically the direction of travel for health and care over the next 10, 20 years. In our sector, and those of you with very keen eyes will realise that in the mental health, learning disability, specialist, forensic style sector, as well as community, being awarded a university teaching partner status is quite rare. It's not an easy thing. In the acute sector, it is often baked into the development of teaching with medical students rotating through, but this is much greater than the medical student and the nursing student placements. This is more to do with the research elements, which gives us an accolade that is now global with University of Cambridge. You will also note that the university has not only offered us the afforded status, but they've also afforded us the use of their logo, which is incredibly powerful for them and for us. So they can use CPFT as part of their research position, as can we with theirs. From a personal point of view, I'm really delighted. I'm really pleased that we've been able to liberate some positive stuff in the organisation to give people the airtime. And if you look into some of our research capability at the moment, Dr. Underwood Ben, who's our research director, as well as an old age psychiatrist, is working in some really cutting edge areas. People like Lily Gliano are working on things such as home office style licensing to use psychotropic medication and psychedelic medication to treat resistant service user conditions. And we have a whole raft of additional very unique research opportunities. That will do two things for us. That will bring in additional employment, making us a very attractive organisation to want to work in. And it will also help us retain people that perhaps towards the more mature end of their careers, give them an opportunity to engage in research. We are opening conversations, Chair, with Anglian Ruskin University to do exactly the same for our nursing staff, our allied health professional staff and social care partners. And we are doing exactly the same with Judge Business School with our non-clinical facing staff to make sure that in the light of austerity, opportunities for staff development, staff learning and staff expression are universal. So whether you're a plumber on our site, whether you're a healthcare support worker, whether you are a neuroscientist or whether you are a district nurse, we want to give everybody the exact opportunity that they would deserve if they work in an organisation that pushes itself to be clinically led. So I'm really proud of that. Second thing I'm very passionate about, which I'm delighted to talk about, is the Race and Health Observatory. Those of you familiar with the Race and Health Observatory stand for a couple of things in the healthcare sector. One is anti-racism and the drive towards recognising and embracing diversity. I've met with the chair and chief executive of the Race and Health Observatory, and they are agreeing to come and work with the trust to be engaged with the trust and help us reach a vanguard status when it comes to being an organisation that truly embraces diversity in the way that it should be felt. To that end, I'm also delighted to accept the executive sponsor position of one of our staff networks, particularly our multicultural staff network, which I met with the team a couple of days ago. A couple of other areas which are quite chunky, Chair, is the end of year financial position. So Kish, our interim finance director, is on the call, and a significant thank you to all of our directorates, operational services, as well as our finance team in trying to help the organisation land in a very bumpy end of financial year of 24-25, and then more importantly to try and think about the glide path that we get through for 25-26 as we start to head through quite a period of heavy change in the NHS and austerity, which I'll touch on in a second. I'm delighted also to recognise that we are now, under Rachel Gomm's leadership, been recognised as a Queen's Nurse Institute. We have over 35 Queen's nurses working in CPFT, which again is a rare accolade across the NHS and something that we shouldn't be shy about celebrating. These are individuals who have been awarded that royal status for a reason. They've dedicated their entire lives to improving nursing care, particularly around physical care and mental health, and that recognition is directly from royal assent, so it is something to be extremely proud of. You will have seen the video. Andrea, thank you for doing a video around our governor elections, and that was really important, that we want to stimulate membership and governance in our organisation to be something that is actually embracing and liberating and gives people the opportunity to demonstrate real transparency and check and challenge each other and keeping each other honest when we start getting through some of the difficulties I'll touch on in a second. We also held International Nurses Day on the 12th of May, which was fabulous, and a big thank you to the Nursing Directorate. There's some lovely pictures on social media, and we also recognise the contribution of some of our nursing staff who've done 40 years in nursing. And I think, and I don't know if Rachel would agree with me, these individuals come to work with the same white gloves on that they did when they were a student nurse. They came and check every corner, every corridor, every pillowcase, and they are proud of the services that they run, Chair, which is something that we need to make sure is universal across our organisation, where we get the basics right. And Sandra, naming Sandra for a second, is somebody that would always talk about one thing and one thing only, which is getting the basics right for patients. And if you ever have the need to visit Fenlands and you walk into the Trafford Centre and you meet Sandra, you will get the exact replication of what nursing really should look like. And I think, Rachel, you'd hopefully agree with me. Bit of a rock star as Sandra. We've been successful in acquiring some new business, which is good to hear. So our commercial strategy is starting to get some traction. This will help us to develop new services and grow our existing. And that expansion is around our perinatal trauma and loss service. So really good to see strategically is moving in the right direction. More importantly, the expansion of this service means that we can look after more mums and make sure that we can access some of the communities that have not been able to talk about this really complex and difficult issue for them. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to expand on that service. And Chair, I'm just going to end on 2 points, if I may. The first is the spending review that I'm sure you are all familiar with, and the highlights of the spending review basically is day-to-day spending is likely to rise across the UK of a real-time increase of about 1.2% per year, and that takes into account a rise of 517 billion to 583 billion, and the capital investment allocations will also grow by actually 1.8%. Now, that might not mean anything to you. What I tuned in on was the statement around the key winners in the spending review, of which there were 4 directly. NHS is one of those, with government putting £29 billion annually back into the NHS, with what is seen to be a 3% real-time rise in health spending, which 10 billion of which is earmarked for digital transformation. Now, we need to be mindful of that because that is a public message from the Chancellor. However, that is against a backdrop of significant challenge and austerity that the NHS has been facing over the last several years post-COVID, and that includes trying to recover a number of billions of pounds, nearly 7 billion to be precise, of real-time spend. That will be taken through changes that the NHS has seen, such as the abolishment of NHS England, such as the reduction of integrated care boards, and such as configuration of what we would class as regulation, CQC, NHS England, Health and Social Care, and Department of Health and Social Care. Education's had a boost, which is good to hear. That's around £2.5 billion to rebuild circa 500 schools, and that will start to help a lot of children. Again, there is areas for us in there because a lot of children, as we currently know, struggle with some of that school age, and therefore our mental health CAM services and our outreach services do have an opportunity to work in that space. And if there's more investment, we should be central to that. And then transport has been given quite a healthy boost, which is quite helpful, particularly for some of our older age or frail communities with some people that can't drive or can't access services at distance, which is again really, really helpful. I think, Chair, I'm just going to end on the last bit for us as a trust. And the team have been working really hard over the last couple of weeks, and this is difficult to hear, but it is what it is. We were given direct instruction to make some fundamental changes to revert back to some of our services for 2018-19 levels of activity. That is across the NHS, and NHS providers have started to make significant moves towards reduction of headcount or reduction of workforce. And actually, we are taking a different view as a trust, Chair. We're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about sustaining CPFT through this period. We will modernise, we will change services, we will look at our cost efficiencies, and our cost efficiency this year is nearly £18 million. That will keep us break even and sustained as we get through this next bit. And there is waste in our trust, there is waste in the systems that we operate in, but there are also quite heavy areas of underfunding and heavy areas of investment that are needed. So as we guide through this next chapter of CPFT into this new financial year, you will see a new NHS plan land roughly in July, maybe the 3rd of July. You'll see the spending review take a grip in that. You may see the fact that the NHS plan is quiet with regards a lot of the work around mental health, learning disabilities and community services, but very loud in the space of elective care and emergency care. But please be rest assured that myself, Eileen and the board are challenging wherever possible to make sure the voice of our services are front and centre, because after all, maybe a cliche, but there is no health without mental health. And we need to make sure that any investment that goes into our acute colleagues is equally shared with the discharge and the community work that we do to keep people safe at home. I think the final thing to say, Chair, is that we will be going back out to the workforce with clear views on the changes that we've needed to make, which we have pretty much already done, meaning that we will be in a position of saying that we've been able to move away from the direct instruction that a lot of organisations are struggling with by having plans in place to do that, and then a robust financial plan to take us through these next 10 months to get us towards the end of the year. I think governors have asked before I started, for more oversight of that, for more transparency around that, and some governors have expressed to me personally that landed too late in the organisation towards the latter end of the year, and I would entirely agree. This year we've started at month 2 because we needed to make some changes. So each of the executive is directly accountable and responsible for areas of change that they are working towards. I think I'll just end on a really positive note, Chair, if I may, and that is that we've also reached out to friends of ours who are service user engagement organisations and people with lived experience to come and touch base with our wards and departments again. This is Positive Practice in Mental Health, who are a national team of 2, I hasten to add. However, they are working with our organisation to touch base in Peterborough and in Cambridge and in our non-localised services such as the Fenlands and so on. And they're working with teams to talk about cultural redesign, what it feels like to work in an organisation that truly is clinically led and values that. And then more importantly, where our co-production side can link in better with our organisation. And I am delighted to tell you that 2 of our teams have been nominated for shortlists to be in national awards, which will be held next Thursday. So I'll keep my fingers crossed to let you know whether they've won or not. but I have a really positive sense that the fact that they've been shortlisted means that they're actually already there because they've done an amazing job. So happy to end there, Chair, and take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Steve. There's clearly a lot there and a lot for the trust to do at pace. So thank you. I did see a comment go into the chat. I don't know, Rick, is anything more you want to say on your comment in the chat?
No, I think it speaks for itself.
Okay, thank you. And I can't see any other hands going up for any further. Oh, yes, I do. I've just seen Miriam's hand pop up. Miriam, do come in.
Thank you. Sorry, just a really quick question. I was just so pleased to see, Steve, the news about the expansion of the perinatal trauma and loss service. So I was just wondering, does that mean now that every woman across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough now has access to this service, or is there still more to do to make it universally available?
I think, Miriam, thank you. There's always going to be more to do, but I think what this has allowed us to do is to open those doors much wider. I think one of the things that we can do with pleasure, because it was in that sort of embargo-y space because of the commercials, that we'll be able to bring back a little bit more detail and an overview of that service, if that is helpful, just to show you where there may be areas of challenge that we still need to fight through to make sure that access is there. This is such an important service, and we can't allow pockets of our population to go with an inequality just because they live in a postcode that isn't in this space.
That's perfect. Thank you. Thanks very much, Steve.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to come in, and then Mohammed?
Thanks very much, Chair. Steve knows I'm going to ask this question because I gave him some pre-notice. So if other people are wondering why I'm asking it when it's not directly in his report, I have had the courtesy of telling him. It's about the Darwin Nursery and the closure of the Darwin Nursery, but I wanted to make a more general question about the processes that Steve may have put in place in order to ensure that executive members of the board know when there is going to be a significant service failure, rather than it coming up from a very surprising route that nobody might have known about. So it's a question. Whilst I would like to know about the Darwin Nursery, I understand that's a kind of level of detail that might be not appropriate for Bob, but what processes have been put in place to make sure that the exec members know what's happening in their patch?
I am assuming, Steve, you're going to answer that. Please
very happy to, and thank you, Andrea. You did give me the heads up, which I hugely appreciate. Thank you. Yeah, there are two issues here, and I think both are related. So, with regards Darwin Nursery's temporary closure as it stands, there were some essential works that we found that needed to be looked at and maintained, with some standards that we needed to lift to make sure that the site itself was safe to deliver the service that it was intended to do. And the reason why I'm saying that in that way is I don't know whether anyone on this call realizes or would realize the actual Darwin site itself is a site that is looking to support people with learning disabilities. It's a site where service users, co-workers get the opportunity to develop new skills, to start to learn how to re-socialize with things or gain experience, life experience outside of environments that may have otherwise socially excluded them. And one of the areas that I think is really important is that we do routine checks over every one of our services. And in this case, I think there were a few things that came up that we were concerned about. And so we needed to make an immediate decision that said the safety of our co-workers and our staff is the most high priority here. And therefore, those changes were made. I am delighted to say that the site is reopened for the service to be provided for our co-workers. However, we have had a lot of members of the public issuing concerns about the fact that they use it as a public facility in a public estate. And as much as I desperately appreciate that, its intention was to deliver safe care to those who were being supported by it. but we are still working with agencies to make sure the rest of the site is able to be managed in a way that is safe for everybody, including members of the public if they access it. I think Andrea's second point is, if I may, is a teeny bit more important. And that is where are the early warning signs? Where are those amber lights before they go red? You know, where are the sense checks? And I think one of the things that I've put in place with the team specifically from October, which has been reflected on by CQC, is a significant strengthening of our oversight and governance arrangements. So our reporting is really clear. Our temperature check, for want of a better word, is not just the thing that we rely on through data reports that say you're on target, but there are stronger checks and balances that says, is it safe, is it caring, is it effective, and is it responsive? And then the well-led bit is in the performance space. So all of that is still work ongoing, and I would really want to make sure that one of our 8 principles as a trust moving forward is outstanding in the area of governance, and we're probably honest enough to say that that could do with improving. And so this has been a really good example of how the team have tackled this with our directorate colleagues, and also how our directorate colleagues identify their own risks and manage those with the right level of support from around the board. So Andrea, it's a very solid point, thank you, and I think this is a good testament to the fact that we've tried and will continue to build and strengthen that.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Can I bring in Mohammed and then Kish? I see your hand has also gone up. Mohammed, do you want to come in?
Hi, Karen. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Steve. I would say congratulations to the Trust on the recent recognitions and achievements as you have highlighted. It's encouraging to see the hard work of team being acknowledged. As a governor, I would like to ask a question from the patient's perspective. It's regarding the waitlist for ADHD and autism assessments. Like we have seen repeated news reports on BBC, including one 2 weeks ago and another one, I think in March, that was highlighting that the patients are waiting on an average of 92 weeks for ADHD and autism assessments. And the news report also states that that the significant increase in the funding is unlikely. So it will be helpful if the board can share what steps are being taken to reduce these waits and support patients and families in the meantime.
Of course, and thank you. If I start with something that is quite high level, and I think if you don't mind me starting at this point, from a national perspective, I think there's a recognition, and I'm pleased to see recognition, certainly within both the NHS plan and at policy level, that autism and ADHD is a significant increase in terms of demand on services, and in many cases has multiplied many times since you took a benchmark in maybe 2018 or you did to today. And a lot of those services, Mohammed, were established at the time when they were designed to meet that demand at that point. And I think certainly for us locally, we really need to go back and revisit that, because we have services that are overwhelmed with demand, or sometimes to a multiplier of 10 compared to where they initially were. Now, that doesn't mean anything to a family that's still waiting to have an autism assessment or waiting for their child if they're worried. The route that we go down is, commissioning or funding or reconstitution of the services. None of that means anything to families, because they are looking to us to make sure that we give them hope and we try and help their loved one as best we can. And I think the most important thing for us here is recognizing there is a national issue. There is a task force that's been created at a national level, but also realizing that that is a very local issue. And it's an issue that we can't just pass over to national and say, this is a big problem. It becomes our problem. It's owned by us as a trust. These are our kids. These are our families. These are our populations. The one thing I am really pleased to see is Stephen at the moment may not have joined us yet, but Stephen and I have been talking with the ICB as it reconstitutes itself with a rebasing, as we call it, a resetting of some of our contracts, and a real sense of what population health looks like, where real demand is coming from, not just a contractual demand. And we've been given the authority and the leadership role with the ICB to look at all of those service specifications, to look at where those demands are, which I think, Mohammed, if I'm honest, is a really positive step that the ICB has taken, because it understands the problems as much as we do. But I think I'd also go as far as to say to those teams picking up calls that are trying to talk to families who are waiting for a long period of time, who are in distress. A huge thank you to those teams, because they get all of this every day and they desperately want to come to work to help, and they don't have the resource to do so. So I think we are driving a lot of that change with our ICB partners, but we'll be able to report out on that in a couple of months when we start to unpack these service specifications. There are hundreds of these things in our service which have contract lines against them, but we won't leave any one of those stones unturned.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Kish, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think it's on 2 points. One was the spending review and Rick's comment. And it's probably allied to a little bit around what Mohammed has said around ADHD and perhaps many others that will have yet to come. Health has indeed received an increase, albeit an increase that is still slightly below the average. So it depends whether you want to see glass half full, glass half empty. But one thing is clear, that not every sector has received an increase. There have been cuts in areas. So we can expect pressure to build on our services because we are so well interconnected into the communities. So I think that's just worth bearing in mind as we go through next year, particularly when we're talking about waiting lists, pressure for services, the pressure that staff will be feeling, okay, about things that they want to do but can't do. So I think it's worth just bearing that point in mind. I think there will be a real challenge for every NHS organisation, how it deals with constrained resources at the same time as being one of the only two areas that has received significant revenue day-to-day increases. So public expectations are likely to rise at the same time as me saying the average increase is still not enough. I think that's likely to be a tough message. I think just one more thing on what Andrea raised there around knowing. I think that's really important, and it's worth probably reflecting on the kind of information that is now being shared at the subcommittees and at this committee as well. It is information, it is assurance, which is very different, okay, than reassurance that perhaps we've been reliant on in some areas for quite a period of time. And that does involve a change in culture to become that bit about being outstanding. You actually can prove what your opinion is, not simply rely on your opinion.
A very valid point there, Kish. Thank you. And Mohammed, I think Steve Lagood has just put a comment in there for you, just for your information. Thank you. Rick, I just saw your comment, but can we pick that up with Natalie at some point outside the meeting, but we'll make sure it gets done. Is that okay?
I'm going to pick it up later in the meeting, actually.
Oh,
when we get to waiting lists.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Then, Andrea, I think it's your next in terms of Governor and Forum updates, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. I will take my report as read. I just wanted to particularly comment on the service of governors, because obviously the election, a huge amount of vacancies. So I, as I have done in the report, would like to thank all of the governors who have given their excellent service and their time and their commitment to the trust. It does make a huge difference. So I couldn't possibly let this meeting pass without commenting on it and thanking my colleagues. So thank you very much, everybody. And for those of you who are restanding, fingers crossed that you get elected.
I can see Ian's hand has gone up if you're finished, Andrea.
Yeah,
Ian,
that's what I wanted to say. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ian, do you want to come in?
Well, yeah, just want to ask a question about the vacancies. There doesn't seem to be a vacancy for a Peterborough patient, Governor.
I didn't hear that. I don't know if anybody else is having difficulty hearing that. No, you're very faint.
Dear. Right, is that better?
Slightly.
Okay. I can't. Is there a vacancy for a Peterborough patient, Governor?
I'm just looking at Andrea's report. Patient governor, it says Cambridgeshire, so it says 2 vacancies.
Yeah,
Patient governor, 2 vacancies for, it just says Cambridgeshire, so I'm assuming that's Peterborough and Cambridge, unless anybody's going to tell me otherwise.
It used to be 1 for Cambridgeshire and 1 for Peterborough. I don't know if there's been a change.
Yeah, can I help? As far as
Go
I'm
on,
aware,
Andrea.
there's no changes. The vacancies that were supplied as listed have been given to me by Nikki. So she hasn't advised me of any changes.
Steve, do you want to come in and shed some light if you've got some light to shed?
It actually wasn't on that point, Chair. I think we can probably just come back and confirm to Ian if we need to, just to get the in case anything's changed. I'm not aware of any changes, the same as Andrew. So I don't think there are, but I don't want to say that, Ian, just in case I've got it wrong. If something changed since Nikki, because she's been on leave. So perhaps Martin, if you could pick this up for us.
Is that okay, Ian? We'll pick that up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
I'll put something in the chat in a minute. I'm just looking, so I think you may be correct, Ian, but leave it with me. I'll put something in
Thank
chat.
you.
Thank you very much. Steve, there was something else you wanted to come in with then?
Well, it was only actually on the back of Andrea's point of saying thank you to people, because I'm very conscious that I do believe this may be the last Council of Governor meeting for some of our governors. So I just, in the spirit of trying to encourage people, I think it would be really positive to say, for those of you that this is your last Council of Governors, a significant thank you. You know, you've been remarkable in terms of your support to the organisation, particularly after the organisation, even in my limited time with it thus far, has demonstrated it's been through quite a lot of change. And I think it's really helpful that your ability to both provide insight and to tell it like it is and to kick the tires has been incredibly useful. And I think that one of the things that we're hoping to do, and certainly Andrea and I have talked about this a lot, is trying to use different ways now to make sure that being a governor and being a member is a lot more open and able for you to try and work with us in a space where you're not just observers, you're actually part of the organisation. So I just want to say thank you to people who've laid the foundations for that, particularly. And this, I think, you know, specifically Rick, your good self, and I think Ian, this is your last one too, isn't it? Not that I want to embarrass anybody particularly, but Rick and Ian. I think we need to sort of say thank you and congratulations.
Thank you for that, Steve. And yeah, Rick and Ian, I don't know if I've been around longer than you, but I think you've definitely been around longer than me. So thank you very much for all the work you've contributed to the trust. Natalie, do you want to come in?
No, sorry, that was supposed to be clapping. Sorry.
Okay. So in terms of Andrea's report and the forums, any questions, or are we okay to move on to our presentation? And I'm just trying to check the time. We're a bit ahead of time, but are they ready, Natalie? Because if so, we'll bring them in. The presentation.
They are actually here already.
Then we'll bring them in then.
Yep.
So as Susanna starts sharing her slides, I'll just introduce us. My name is Sarah O'Curry. I'm a psychologist and I'm joint head of paediatric psychological medicine. And I have with me today Susanna Watson, who's a paediatric neuropsychologist, and Gemma Costello, who is the clinical lead for the Cambridge Centre for Paediatric Neuropsychological Rehabilitation, which we shortened to CCPNR, but actually we're quite keen to find another name. So if you're feeling creative, you could let us know any thoughts you had. So I'm just going to introduce them. The CCPNR is a trailblazer nationally and internationally. It's the only service of its kind in the UK. It's the only community neuro rehab service for children and young people. We were very privileged to have 2 of your members come and visit when we did a workshop with the with the Cambridge Centre, the Cambridge Regional College, a culinary day where the young people got to cook and serve and practice their skills and actually use a lot of their neuropsychological skills and OT and physio input to create a wonderful lunch. So we had Mike and Karen visit, which so thank you for inviting us to present here today. We're really pleased to tell you about our small and mighty team. It sits within the wider Paediatric Psychological Medicine Service, which works with children with long-term health conditions and children in hospital. And we, as a whole, provide the only end-to-end pathway for children with acquired brain injury. So children who land through the regional major trauma service onto the paediatric intensive care, all the way out through into the community, where we support community services to work with head injuries that they're not familiar working with. So I will hand over to Susanna.
Sarah, could I just ask while there's a slight handover?
Yes.
Just you've just done it. Thank you. Put it on presentation mode. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Can you hear me? Is my microphone working? Great, thank you. So yes, as Sarah said, this feels like such an opportunity to hear your thoughts and reflections and feedback. So we're going to try and talk less and listen more. That's our aim. But it feels like a real honour to be here. So we are an interdisciplinary regional community neuro rehab service for children up to 19 with ABI. And it started with a collaboration between the Oliver Zangwill Centre, which was an adult rehab centre up in Ely, and CAMS, due to the high number of children who were ending up with costly inpatient residential stays as a result of their rehab needs. And it's neuropsych led, but it's very interdisciplinary, and it has to be. It's a, in inverted commas, one-stop shop. So that it means that children can come and get all of their needs met in the same place at the same time, rather than having to bounce around multiple services and multiple clinicians with the right expertise. So we started in 2009, and in 2014, the average time to from injury to referral was still 3.7 years. And that's, I think, really reflective of where the service was. We were over in the Ida Darwin, and we were very disconnected based on the adult model as a kind of centre that would be separate. And now, through the work that I'm going to tell you about, we have a context-sensitive pathway that goes from PICU to out into the local community offers across the region. We have an ABI clinic which has been transformational, that has already seen over 1,000 young people. And as Sarah said, we're a small whole-time equivalent. The cost of the service is less than 300,000, and that is still cheaper than sending somebody for a one person in the region for a residential inpatient stay, as you know. Just to refresh, because I didn't know how much ABI knowledge the people here would have. But these are the kinds of acquired brain injuries we're talking about. Sarah mentioned the traumatic brain injuries, and then we also have the non-traumatic injuries, the infections, the strokes, the tumours, the metabolic conditions. And so I apologise again if we're teaching you to suck eggs here, but just as a reminder, because when I did the training for the paediatricians just recently, not many of them knew this, and this is part of our challenge of getting people to, helping people understand the complexity of ABI. That if you look at the trajectory graph, what tends to happen is kids bounce back physically so well, so quickly, that most people think, oh, they might be almost walking, but mostly maybe talking. But what they don't get to see is what happens downstream, because that brain is still developing, and they've now got to that child has now got to try and cope with all the developmental things downstream with a brain that has been impaired. And we see these different trajectories, that sometimes you might get a great natural recovery, but we don't know unless we look downstream. And so the data shows us that suicide risks don't hit their peak until 5 to 7 years post-injury, when the trajectory, the gap between the young person and their peers really starts to widen. And then what we see in the offender population is estimates of 50 to 70% of people in the offender population are reporting to have had a brain injury. And just going back to that reminder, when we first started, we weren't seeing people for 3 or 4 years post an injury, and now we've got this pathway. Again, I think this might be just information that you probably know, but there's 40,000 approximately a year, and there's not the training in what happens to the brain and for kids, that there are critical periods for different things to develop, and that if if for example you have a frontal lobe injury, that may not actually become apparent until your frontal lobe starts to be recruited for tasks when you're in your you've gone through puberty. So you might have an injury when you're under 5, but no one's really going to get that that's going to have an impact on you until you're a lot older. It's a massive health inequality, as you can probably imagine. More people from areas of social deprivation are more likely to have children who are less supervised and going to end up with traumatic brain injuries. And these are the group that are they're excluded, they're ending up in youth justice. So a little bit about our data. When we reviewed it initially, when I say we, the Royal We, Anamore from Adam Brooks, there are over 1,000 a year, but most importantly, nearly 50% of these are under 5s. So this is before there's any institutional memory that this child has had a brain injury. So often these are the families that are presenting chaotically in schools, and their child looks like they've got a learning disability, and people just assume that that's probably the situation. Children with brain injuries have the same level of mental health needs as children in CAMS. We know the earlier the injury, the worse the outcome. We know that if you intervene earlier, it saves money. And the biggest thing they tell us they want to be able to do is just to be able to participate with their peers. And it doesn't seem like it's kind of rocket science, but the interdisciplinary understanding you need to help them to be able to do that is really important. The other thing I just wanted to say is that one of our trainees did this great piece of work looking at parental trauma and depression. And this is really important about not being able to bring your kid to your appointments if you're traumatized and you can't get out of bed. And it has a massive impact on the rehab. So we really have to think about the family, not just the child. When we went through all the goals of the first 100 children, we asked kids for 3 goals each. The top goals were being able to participate in school, to be able to cope with their emotions, and to have support to be able to do that. And this is just a wordle of the goals that the children reported. So we wanted to know what the commissioners wanted us to be doing, and thanks to a Clark Fellowship, I got to go and speak to the survey what was available in the region, and then work with the commissioners to look at, we'd got the goals from the children, we knew what the resources were across the region, and then we could think together about what they wanted it to look like in terms of delivery. And they said really sensible things like try and get them out earlier and try and get the community to be able to have the skills to meet their needs, have a coordinator, make the most of our local offer, train up our local teams, have a network, upskill, and most importantly, the ABI clinic came out of that work. So as Sarah said, we're really lucky we've got through CPFT a pathway that starts in the paediatric intensive care unit that goes all the way across to the community, which means we've got amazing work with the intensivists in intensive care, brain physics that blows my mind in terms of being able to manage complex cerebral pressure after an injury, intracranial pressure, through to then, how do these children participate down the line? So it's a really integrated work, and for me, it's the kind of magic of the trusts working together. I've just put this slide up. I tried to, part of my fellowship, look into health economics, and then when I realised what a proper area of expertise it is, I realised all I could do was just add up the figures of how much it would cost for these two young people who got referred to us at different periods but had very similar injuries, and one got community neuro rehab, and so Jack got the community neuro rehab from the CCPNR and Lindsay didn't. And so Lindsay's costs in 2018 were 272,000 and Jack's were significantly less. And the big thing is just what you can do with a little bit and how you can work locally. And what we see is lots of children bouncing around different services, not getting their needs met, not having their needs understood, and until it gets worse and worse. I showed you that trajectory graph, and if we can get in there earlier, it's going to cost a lot cheaper. And I think for the commissioners, who'd already had to pay a big inpatient stay, that was when they wanted to work more closely, I think, with the service. So I'm going to hand over to Gemma now, the clinical need for the CCPNR, because she can tell you a bit more about what the pathway looks like now.
Thanks, Susanna. And I really am going to whiz through because I know we said we wanted to have the opportunity to kind of take the questions. So in terms of our pathways, we said we're a regional service. So we have a block contract with Cambridgeshire and Peterborough ICB, which we're really fortunate to have, which allows us to kind of prioritise needs for children and young people from that area, albeit we have quite a long waiting list for that region. But all of the other areas, they're funded via individual funding requests via the specialist kind of contracts that we have for specialist commissioning. We have a really good relationship with our commissioners, particularly across Norfolk and Waveney, Bedford, Luton, Milton Keynes, Mid and South Essex, who all tend to turn an individual funding request around within a week, which is seriously impressive and faster than we can keep up with in our clinical team. But it's great to see that they're really understanding the needs of this group, and I think it speaks to, as Susanna said, the kind of the cost benefits, but also the outcomes that we see and the trajectories that we then support children and young people to get onto, which are then really positive and prevent some of those alternative trajectories that we're essentially trying to avoid. So if you can just move on, Susanna, thank you. So this is our NHSE service specification, which is actually currently being reviewed at the moment. So we sit within the kind of the level 2 aspects of that community specialist rehabilitation, which is why we have these individual funding requests to provide that. Next one, Susanna, thank you. And Susanna's already touched on the acquired brain injury clinic. So in our top left-hand corner, and this is really, I think, the kind of crux and the anchor point really for our children and young people with ABI. So we'll have that end-to-end pathway, PICU, out into the wards in D2, and then children and young people are very quickly followed up in the ABI clinic. We have voluntary organisation, the Child Brain Injury Trust there. We have members of the CCPNR team who attend that alongside our neurology colleagues who lead the clinic. And what the aim to do is to provide psychoeducation for families at that really early stage, talking about these trajectories of things we might be looking out for, but also about making sure that we're linking in with local community services, just like those commissioners asked us for. How do you support local shared understanding of acquired brain injury and how to meet these needs? What will often happen is children and young people then come back in for follow-ups into that ABI clinic. But there are times where, and particularly as we're moving into adolescence and we think about those long-range connections into those frontal lobes, where needs start to emerge and children and young people start to grow into them, and the risk of alternative narratives building perhaps around their needs. And so that's often when they then become CCPNR young people in terms of the specialist rehabilitation. And we have these 3 different packages, 21s, which are initial assessment, working with community services, much more of a liaison offer, 50 hours, which is much more of an assessment package, again, shared understanding, formulation of need around ABI, and then signposting back out into those community services, or those that need all of the above, plus specialist neurorehabilitation offer from our interdisciplinary team. In terms of what does rehab look like, we just wanted to give you a really quick overview. A lot of our work is about supporting psychological adjustment for young people and for their families, creative approaches to kind of processing, reducing post-traumatic stress symptoms. We'll do cognitive rehabilitation, supporting young people through kind of executive functioning, goal plan reviews, thinking about memory focused interventions. You've got Kung Fu groups here where we've seen some really lovely research be produced amongst the team around things like executive functioning. Our culinary workshop, which we've already kind of mentioned earlier, where young people were kind of developing skills, learning to talk to one another about their experiences of their ABI, but also being client facing and talking to the public as they kind of served us the things that they had made, and also allowing us to work with their parents at the same time. We do lots of adjustment work around things like Tree of Life, exploring new narratives, new ways of being, following injuries. And there's a lovely video there on our website if anyone wants to watch it, which was created with the BBC pre my time in the service, but with, I think, is it Kaz and Susanna, you'll have to tell me.
Zach,
talking about their experiences of rehabilitation and what that looked like in the service. And as I think Sarah started with, small but mighty, we are very fortunate to be in the position, I think, within CPFT where this is being considered a gold standard kind of service. So not only is the NHSE kind of service specification at the moment thinking that, you know, how do we get CCPNRs as a national kind of offer across all the other regions, but also it's kind of coming to government attention. And so we've had representation at roundtable events and also within Time for Change reports, and also the most recent publication, which was done just a couple of weeks ago, which is talking about the cost effectiveness and cost implications as well of not providing rehabilitation for children and young people. And we will be at a roundtable event in just 2 weeks' time talking about acquired brain injury in education at Parliament, just really trying to kind of raise this awareness and get this shared understanding of what happens when these needs aren't understood or aren't recognised, and the benefits of being able to kind of upskill and share that knowledge with teachers and those within the community. Do you have any questions? It's a whistle-stop tour and we're really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
I've stopped sharing. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I will open it up for questions, but from a personal perspective, it was absolutely brilliant to hear it again. So thank you very much. I think first off, the mark was probably Kish. Where
You're
is
on
it?
mute.
Yeah,
Help if I did this. Sorry. So that was a really good presentation. Can I just ask you in terms of what you said, access? Okay, so what about, I suppose, have you looked at inequalities in terms of who accesses your services? I mean, I suppose it's not just, I suppose, race inequality. What struck me was what you said about the children and when they access it from socioeconomic groups, and I suppose particularly the male-female split.
Yes, we do kind of consider that within our data and kind of our kind of governance reporting. We kind of have a real kind of hybrid offer, and we're very kind of person-centered in the offer that we provide to our families. So a lot of what we do is we do travel widely across the region, and particularly we will find ourselves in certain areas more often than others. Obviously for those that can't kind of travel into the service, so it's about us reaching out into their local communities. I guess that's also why such a big part of what we offer is about working with the local community services and upskilling their knowledge and their understanding of acquired brain injury, but also connecting them with their skills and how actually sometimes it's a slightly different adjustment or just a tweak to the therapeutic offer that they might need to be providing that will then enable that to be provided close to home in the local area with services that they know, and will have much more of a longer term relationship with. So a lot of what we do is consultative as well, into those kind of local provisions, as well as kind of them bringing that specialist knowledge into the local area.
Actually, sorry, go on.
I think one of the things that you might want to have a look at is what you said, how you contract, okay, and whether that actually has an impact on the health inequality. So block contracts have a tendency to be more open and leave you to manage the demand. IFRs, I just wonder whether there's an inbuilt inequality taking place that you might want to just have a quick look at.
Yeah, definitely. And we we use the Child Brain Injury Trust quite a lot to support, because obviously families in certain areas will be in a position to, or certain positions as families will be able to advocate for their child's needs in line with the service specification. We tend to link in really closely with those voluntary organisations to support families to advocate for what their child is entitled to, as well as thinking very actively about our role in that, particularly within certain areas. But you're right, there is a health inequality, and it sits not only nationally but also within the region. It's definitely something we have to give true attention to.
Can I just add to that, that we've been doing work for a number of years now with the regional ICBs, trying to get them to see that a block is actually much more effective, much more efficient, and because then it allows us to resource the team properly to meet the need that's coming in. And we were almost there, and now there's been this reorganisation of ICBs, so we were almost there with getting some blocks with Norfolk and BLNK and so on. But then we'll get another chance, I think. We are working closely with CPFT commissioning.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to come in?
Yes, please, Chair. I'm really conscious, folks. Thank you. I'm really conscious that I'm not supposed to show bias in my job, but that was one of the best presentations I've heard in a very long time. So I'm going to break the rules for a second and just say that was fantastic. And do you know what? What comes out of this is you spoke a lot about commissioning, and I really appreciate that, and contracting and the mechanism around it. But dead centre in the middle of this, you can understand the impact this makes on families and the change that you're able to make to someone's life journey. I mean, not just their intervention, but their life journey, and that is incredible. And I want to say thank you for doing it, never mind sort of presenting it. But I think the other thing, Karen, this is really important, is that we're in the middle of developing a revised clinical strategy moving forward as a trust, and underpinning that is a real sense of our population need, our population health, our demography, our socioeconomics, all of the stuff that we have to take into consideration. And one of the things that we need to make sure is that services like this remain really prominent in that conversation, because we are writing a strategy to reset our next 10 years as to where we're going. But rather unashamedly, I want to use that to influence commissioning, because I think that is going to have that real data set and evidence base that underpins all of the stuff that you've just shared. And you're absolutely right, health economics is a bit of a dark art. And when you get into that, but the social value, I've seen young adults with brain injuries living in supported accommodation by themselves because they are not supported in terms of their developmental journey, that end up in a much worse set of outcomes than they ever would if this service didn't exist. And I've experienced and seen that with my own eyes. And I think if you then wrap away the care of this and you talk about the economic cost, it costs millions to look after somebody during that process. And actually their life journey is nowhere near where it could be if something like this wasn't there. So would you do me a small favour? Could you have a word with our medical director, Kathy, and Catherine Faulkner, who's writing the clinical strategy for us? And I'll come and visit you as well, if that's okay. But I really want to see this as a prominent feature.
That's brilliant. Thank you. We will.
And my apologies for being biased.
Stephen, do you want to come in, and then Rick?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I just want to echo what everybody said. I mean, I go back to many, many, many years ago when this service wasn't there, and then there was an original business case written that actually drove this. And this organisation took a bit of a risk. We did a bit of private patients. We actually then really drove something and showed a level of innovation, transformation, and actually really taking something forwards. And we were slightly courageous in doing it. It got a bit bumpy over the years, but I look and hear what you guys have done. I just sit here in awe. So look, thank you very much for a great presentation. And I'm totally with Steve, you know, front and centre of the clinical strategy, and front and centre actually of the organisational strategy on this as well. And then a sort of a broader alignment to the work we're doing around the Children's Hospital and everything else as well. So absolutely fantastic. And thank you all very much.
Thank you. Rick, do you want to come in?
Yeah, and I echo what's been said already about the presentation, which was really good and very informative. Yeah, my question is, how, this is kind of a personal question, I'm asking your opinion really, is how much awareness do you think there is in primary care of what you do? Because it's, when I looked at the pack and I did a little bit of research and I saw the prevalence of ABI, I was amazed at how high the prevalence was for something that I'd never really heard of, I'll be honest. And that made me think, are GPs aware of this? And I'm seeing your head shake.
No, and you've just reminded me that I was trying to get into the GP training to think about how we can support GPs with this understanding, and particularly that downstreamness, what happens if with an early injury. And I did some training last week with the paediatricians at Addenbrooke's, and 1 in 10 thought that it'd be better to have an injury when you're a child versus an adult. And so even within paediatrics, we still need to have loads of support to help each wave of people coming through to understand that.
I'd say we've seen the same within education as well, and with professionals within community services. That similar pattern of not realising that the outcomes actually in childhood have that longer term downstream effects and impact ongoing trajectories. So there's a real psychoeducation role.
Yeah, is there anything we can do to help as a trust? You don't have to answer that on the spot. But
do you have in terms of training, is there some and thinking about upskilling and training the workforce in the region, is there somebody who leads on the strategy for that for the trust?
Steve, can you answer that? Because I definitely think there needs to be visibility of the work that is going on.
So I think I think we should pick this up offline. So Suzanne, Gemma, Sarah, why don't you come knocking at my door? We can also talk to Kathy, because we've got the medical aspect of the training as well, and we've got Terza and other people, so we can have a conversation. We can link you across as well with the NHSE, the training, the deanery, etc. there. I mean, there's also something about how you're commissioned and what you're commissioned to take from as well. So I think we perhaps just need to unpack a bit of that behind the scenes as well. But absolutely great opportunity. And actually, again, we should be shouting from the rafters about this anyway. But let's take it offline.
Steve, do you want to add to that?
Only a tiny little bit, because this week we've launched a universal adoption of the culture of care mechanisms across the trust. And I, for one, am a massive advocate of having organisations that are trauma informed and autism aware. And I think, Rachel's leading out on that for us as chief nurse. But something like this, again, sits dead centre in this, where you've got practitioners that are very used to looking at things from a transactional clinical perspective rather than a longitudinal perspective. And I think the bit that we can do is demonstrate that not only do you adapt your clinical practice to consider that bit, but there are agencies that will continue to support this. But we can lock that into the culture of care conversation, because that is going to be a big shift for us as a trust. I think it's a very exciting clinical movement, actually. And I think most people around in a clinical space would have said about time. But I think we've been brave in saying, let's not pilot it, let's just go for it.
Absolutely. Rachel, do you want to comment?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Great. And again, I'm a bit like Steve, and I remember when you first started in Heron Court and seeing you then, Susanna. And just following on from what Steve said in terms of cultural care, I also think there's an opportunity here that we can think about, and again offline, but in terms of doing potentially presentation to, I've just been on a call earlier with regional chief nursing officers, and we have presentations on all sorts of things. I think, to be honest, showcasing something just to be opening up other people's eyes to this would be incredibly helpful, because I think, as you say, that trajectory of where young people, their life trajectories are affected by this so much, and the lack of understanding. It takes me back to speech and language difficulties in very young children, and the amount of young people that end up in, again, the in prison, that and very much misunderstood within that. So I think the more we do in terms of this is very much the prevention of future harm very often, isn't it? Right. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
And sorry, my camera's off. I've got real connectivity issues.
No problem. Your picture is lovely. I suppose from me, like you say, Mike and I came out to Cambridge to the regional college, and we were absolutely blown away the work you're doing. In particular, seeing the kids in action, and the food was excellent. I know at the time, I think it was with you, Sarah, to promise we will get some publicity. I haven't forgotten, but I think coming here today has really shifted the focus in terms of what can be done. And I think the fact that some of these early injuries only show up as the brain develops, that's news to me. And as Stephen said, we need to start looking at this over time and understanding the impact it has on the suicide risk and the offending rate, which again is something I never knew. So thank you very much. I don't have to be biased or otherwise, but I think it's probably one of the most impressive services I've visited since I've been on the trust, the work you do. So thank you very much. And thank you very much for taking time to come and speak to us. And yes, definitely pick up with Steve Lagood and Kathy, because I think this is some excellent work that we can showcase for the trust without doubt, because it is so unique. So thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for inviting us.
You are welcome. Right, I'm just looking at the time. Do we want to take a 5-minute comfort break before we crack on? Yeah? We'll take 5 and then we will... What's the time now? So we'll just take a 5-minute quick comfort break and then crack on with the rest of the agenda, if that's okay with everybody.
Thank you.